and welcome to We Will Talk About It, the Supernatural Rewatch podcast where we watch one episode every week, spoiler-free. I'm Megan.
I'm Kat.
And this week we are talking about Season 1, Episode 12, Faith.
Again, this back on from Scarecrow is also one of my favourite episodes.
I don't think any of the episodes from Season 1 are in my top 5.
Okay. Well, Scarecrow is in my top 5. This is just a really good episode. I just really like this episode. I think it's a very... I don't know, the theme of the episode's very sweet. Like, when I say sweet, in the sense of, I don't know, it seems more real, more plausible. Like, it could happen, you know, in our, like, reality.
Yes. And, well, you actually share something with your bestie, Eric Kripke.
I do I?
So, Eric Kripke, and I'm quoting from the Supernatural Wiki, guys, of course, cites Faith as his favourite episode of Supernatural, saying... It's when I first realised what the show was capable of. Here's this episode about, is there a God, what's meant to be, and is there free will, and is your life worth the cost of someone else's life? It's a metaphysical and moral study of the boys' universe. There's so many different places the show can go and so many tones. That's been really fun to do. So this episode...
Essentially, it was what I said, but way simpler and less smart. And way less, words. But it's very true. Like, it's one of those episodes where it's like... I mean, just in life in general, I would do absolutely anything for this person. The person I love dearly, I would go to any lengths. And I really enjoyed this episode because it's not far-fetched. I mean, what happens in the episode, far-fetched, but just the build-up.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think this was where Eric Kripke realised the potential of the show to be something more...
Than just Monster of the Week.
Yeah, than just Monster of the Week, or even just kind of the main story that they're telling. So yeah, this is a really kind of pivotal episode. So this episode was directed by Alan Croker and written by Rael Tucker and Sarah Gamble, who we have mentioned before a couple of times as writing a few episodes. And yeah, let's crack into it.
Yes, let's do.
So we actually open on a hunt. So we kind of open in the middle of the action. Sam and Dean are hunting a rawhead, which we don't really learn a ton about what they are.
It's an abandoned house of such.
Yeah, but we don't know necessarily what kind of creature or monster a rawhead is. Yeah. We go into this abandoned house. They find some children who do look like Victorian orphans.
They're just two scared kids.
But they do look like they're from 1782.
They do.
They are trying to get the kids out of the house, and before they go into the house, Dean and Sam have loaded up with tasers that they'd jacked up to like some insane number of volts.
1 million volts. I don't know.
20,000 or something, some massive amount of volts. Because that's how you kill a rawhead, is with electricity.
Yeah.
So they're trying to get the kids out of the house. The rawhead grabs Sam and pulls him down the stairs.
Into the basement.
Sam and Dean are fighting the rawhead. Sam runs after the kids to make sure they're safe. And then Dean kills the rawhead with the taser. But in doing so, because he's in a pool of water, he's ended up in a pool of water, he gets electrocuted. And Sam runs back downstairs. Dean is unconscious, and that's
cold open, very snap.
That's the cold open, a very intense cold open.
Very 9 seconds of just like, what is happening here?
Absolutely. And this is such a bold move for an episode to imply that maybe one of the main characters is dead.
Yeah.
In the first 90 seconds of the episode.
To quote from Dodgeball, the movie, it's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out. It's always when I see some bold moves, it's a bold move.
So we cut to a hospital. Sam is talking to the cops. He's explaining kind of their backstory, which is that they were driving through. They had the windows down. They heard kids screaming. They went inside and an accident occurred. The doctor walks up and tells Sam that Dean has had a heart attack. It was a massive heart attack and that he won't survive. He's only got a few weeks, maybe months left.
What's the news, Doc? Jesus Christ, Dean is dying.
Yeah, and so that's what I mean. Like, that's such a fucking bold move in
episode 12.
In episode 12 to be like, the main character is dying. And Sam goes to speak to Dean.
Given that dark humor.
Dean definitely has that dark humor about death. You better make sure you take care of my car, he says.
He's basically his wife, essentially.
Yeah.
He's like his car wife.
And Sam's like, that's not funny. And Dean is acting like he's accepted his fate.
Peace.
that he's like, I guess you're going to be leaving without me. And Sam's like, I'm not going
Anywhere.
without you. And it's interesting rewatching this episode because there's only one element of this episode that I remember from the first time I saw it. Like, this is such a big episode, and you'd think that I would have a memory of being worried about Dean or whatever the case might be, but I really don't. I have one memory of one element, or sort of two elements, which I'll talk about when we get there. But yeah, I don't really remember this episode.
When you asked me to do this podcast, we were obviously going through all our favorite episodes and remembering like, oh my God, I can't wait to get to this episode and that episode. I mentioned this episode. I'm like, I can't wait till we get to Faith because it's such a, for me, it's one of those episodes, like, obviously by this stage, we discussed earlier that there was a particular point where I like Skin is where it clicked for me. Everything fell into place. By this stage, I'm already like halfway through the season. This particular episode, it just resonated.
Yeah.
I don't know why, like maybe at the time in my life I was like, yeah, I understand where Sam has been. Having, lost my dad and stuff. Losing someone significant in your life that you think you can't live without. I mean, you don't really you learn to adapt your life, right?
Yeah.
I can see Sam's reasoning and bargaining. Going through grief. He's essentially starting the grief process.
Yeah.
And I think watching this as someone who's past where Sam is in the grief cycle is like, I resonate, and I feel like that's why this episode is so, people who watch it who have unfortunately gone through grief can understand the bargaining and like refusing to give up. No, we're going to try as much as we can. We're going to drink our kale smoothies. We're going to do these things because it's going to help you live longer.
Yeah.
And whereas Dean's already, he's grieved in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
He's gone through all the stages. And he's now like, nope, I've accepted my life. You need to carry on the mission kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking off my big brother hat and I'm passing it to you. Keep following the track.
But do we believe that Dean has accepted this and is like,
oh, he's
processed
faking
it?
No.
Like, or is this a bit more of his kind of performative masculinity?
This is definitely Dean giving us a performance.
Yeah.
He's very much like, I think he's doing, as you and I are both the eldest of siblings, it's masking your pain.
Yeah. You have to be the brave one.
You have to be the brave one. So I reckon on the inside, he's shitting his pants going, well, shit, I'm only 26 and I'm dead.
Yeah. So we cut to Sam. He's in a motel. He calls Dad and leaves a message to say that Dean's hurt and they don't think he's going to make it, but for Dad not to worry because Sam is going to save him.
Yeah.
He is surrounded by paper. He's clearly researching what he can do. He even says on the message, they say he's not going to make it, but they don't know the stuff that we know about how the world actually works, which is also kind of true. And then he hears a knock at the door and he goes to the door and it's Dean.
Yeah, he's checked himself straight.
He's checked himself out. He doesn't want to stay in a hospital and die there where the nurses aren't even hot, which...
I mean, on brand.
Yeah, and also that kind of, like you said, that sort of bravado of being brave and putting on a brave face for Sam.
Yep.
Sam is like, well, I've been researching how to save you and I've found a specialist who,
right.
who can help. And Dean, I think, goes along with it. I don't think he particularly has much hope that there's anything anyone can do. But then they actually show up and they're actually out of faith healers.
I know. Faith healers for me all fall under the snake oil salesman. If it brings you peace, you do you. Everyone has a choice. I don't particularly like the whole, I'm going to heal you if you just pray harder. It is such, again, going through the grief process, it's the bargaining. You're bargaining. And the fact that there are people out there, I'm not saying all of them, faith healers, prey on the vulnerable. No. So for me, I'm just like, this brought up some negative feelings of, you shouldn't be doing it, but obviously different because this episode takes a different turn than one.
Yes, we're in the world of the supernatural. So.
Yes. But yeah, Dean is about reality and Sam 100% is like willing to give absolutely anything a try because he's in a different stage of grief. And I am definitely Dean in this episode. I'm like, no.
But I think it's also deeper than that because when they first show up and Dean's like, you told me it was a doctor, not that it was a faith healer. And Sam's like, I believe I said specialist. And he's like, these are all a bunch of frauds. And Sam's like, the world that we live in. If there is evil out there, surely there can be good too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of the deeper level of this, of their conflicting worldviews, which is that Sam believes that if there is evil, there must be good.
There's the yin and yang.
And Dean sees only that the world is full of pain, and that all he can do is try and stem the pain of for others, and maybe therefore fill a certain void for himself. So I do think there's an element of grief, but I think that this story explores something else as well about who they are at their core and what they believe to be true about the world, and as we talk about Dean's self-worth.
Yeah. I think also based on that, like that train as well, that little deeper of knowledge deeper understanding of them, Sam doesn't, like, if we go taking it back to OG where it started, Sam doesn't remember the bad from the first bit of his life because the bad happened when he was like 6 months old. Dean saw it. So it makes sense that Sam would have that little bit of a rosy colored glasses. Like, if there's good and there's bad, of course, because he doesn't remember seeing his mum die. He doesn't remember the house fire. He doesn't remember that part of his life where Dean does. And I think that's when Dean lost his innocence quite early, like when he was about 4 or 5. And I feel that's where it starts the process of Dean seeing everything as evil, but he can help by stemming the evil and by giving, a small portion of people he saves a chance of being happy or moving on with their lives. And then therefore feeding into his self-worth of, I know there's no good in the world, but I'm going to try and create my own good. So they're at the Faith Healers. Dean is very much like, this is not a specialist. I mean, giving Sam big...
Before we go further though.
Yeah.
My next note.
Yes.
All cap locks.
Yes.
Darla.
Rita is my one.
We should explain.
So
as they're going into the Faith Healers tent and they're having this conversation about if there's evil, then surely maybe there can be good.
Good, yep.
A woman pipes up to say that you maybe should have some faith. And we turn around. Dean immediately turns into Moxie Dean.
Of course he does.
And he's like, well, I think you're changing my mind. And she's a very like, okay, mate, like calm down. And
he's trying to flood basements and she's just like, they've been proofed since 1994 kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Love it.
Time and place. My note says, Dean, sex would kill you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The thought of an erection would be the end of your life.
Yeah. Like you're going to die from a heart attack. Don't get that heart rate up, mate.
Yeah.
But the woman that they're speaking to, whose name is Layla, is played by Julie Benz.
Yes.
Who, for the massive nerds out there, played the vampire Darla in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Incredible actress, like fantastic character, and you know her from
Dexter. So she played Rita, which is Dexter's beard, essentially, like normal beard. And you're looking at me like, what? I'm like, in a sense that Dexter is a killer.
No, I know the plot, but not like gay beard.
Not gay beard in a sense of masking being normal.
So we go into the tent and we meet the faith healer or the preacher. His name is Roy LaGrange, and he is accompanied by his wife, Sue-Ann. The service starts, and of course, Dean at some point mutters something under his breath. He mutters that they're just there to take his money.
But while he's doing that, he's also surveying the surrounds of the tent. I mean, there is something about a tent in some wetlands, I'm just saying. But he's surveying, he's noticing, like, obviously the preacher. I kept referring to him as the preacher. I know he's not a preacher / faith healer / whatever you want to call him, charlatan, whatever. That's what Kat's been using. And he's noticed that, like, there's a weird cross. There's like not a normal...
Well, Sam notices that, not Dean.
Sorry, you're right. Sorry. There's some things that are just like, oh, that's a bit strange. But, nothing untowards, there's no human sacrifice. There's no goats being slaughtered.
No. And obviously this plays into kind of that sort of cliche of the Southern Baptist church, speaking in tongues and faith healing and a lot of that sort of thing. So this obviously plays into a lot of those elements. But Dean sort of mutters under his breath that it's about, all about money. And Roy speaks up and he's like, "Oh, do you think so, son?" And Dean is like, "Oh,
he loses about 10 feet of his height."
Yeah, and Roy says that, don't be careful of what you say in front of a blind man because he's blind.
All his other senses are heightened.
And there are all his others, the senses are heightened. And then he calls on Dean as the person that he's going to heal today.
Because how it works is that Roy doesn't pick the people. God is speaking through him. So God will pick who he believes is the right person that is to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
So Dean has a bit of says his thing. Roy sasses him in a great way, and not rude as well. It's just just be careful what you say. I may be blind, but great hearing. And then Dean, shrinks down into itty bitty size. But then, as Roy, as we know, picks him up and says, "You've been chosen." So,
Yeah, and Dean immediately says, "No, you don't pick me, pick someone else." And Sam's like, "Get up there. Yeah. That's why we're here."
If Sam could have picked Dean up without hurting him and thrown him onto the stage, he would have just been like, "I'm picking you up and throwing you onto the stage." So Dean goes to the stage.
As Roy starts to pray, Dean gets dizzy and then collapses. Sam rushes up to the stage, and as Dean comes to, he sees a very spooky-looking man.
Yeah, I was like, "What the fuck?"
For a second, and before he disappears.
Yeah, my note is, what the fuck was that just behind the preacher man? Because it kind of flickers. It flickers in and out, and then Dean sort of essentially passes out, but not passes out, but sort of just.
And then we cut, and now Sam and Dean are at a doctor's, and the doctor says that Dean's heart is fine, and that he is healed, and that it's uncommon for a young man to have any heart issues. But then she's like, it does happen though. Just yesterday, there was a young man, 27 years old, who dropped dead from a heart attack
while running,
and while swimming. Swimming.
And
yes. Dean sort of looks at Sam, and you can see the cogs in Dean's head are turning, because Dean, I think we're starting to get this sense that Dean doesn't feel like he deserves to be saved.
No.
And he's looking for something. And obviously he's just seen this kind of figure as he's been healed that didn't seem good.
Yeah.
And so they're talking afterwards, and Dean is like, I don't think whatever this was good. When I was being healed, it felt wrong. I felt cold. And then I saw this figure.
Yeah.
And then now we're finding out that a man approximately my age, for no reason, dropped dead from the exact same thing that was meant to kill me.
Yeah, and Sam is like, okay, well, let's not rule out that it was a good thing, but just to appease you, Dean, because you're now healed, let's just investigate. So I love that Dean is the one that goes and talks to Roy about how he got his powers, and Sam goes off and interviews witnesses regarding the fellow that passed.
Yeah, so Dean wants to understand what happened, how Roy got his powers, and Roy says that he woke up one day blind, and it turned out he had cancer and it was terminal, and there was nothing anyone could do. He went into a coma, and then he was miraculously healed.
But he was still blind.
But then he had the power to heal others ever since that time.
Yeah.
And they, but he considers them to be miracles from God.
Yeah.
And Dean asks him, why him? Why pick him? Again, sort of getting into this idea of Dean's worth of himself. And Roy says, God picked you. I didn't pick you because you still have work to do.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting use of language, and it's very kind of interesting given what we kind of learn about the origins of this power as to why Roy did pick Dean, or where Roy's beliefs about who should be picked would come from. So that's really interesting.
It's a little bit of a nugget information.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Sam is talking to one of the people who works at the pool. And he's like, no, he was really fit. He ran every day. Like, he just dropped dead. But before he dropped dead, he was running like something was like, he was swimming like something was chasing him. He got out of the pool. He was running like something was chasing him. He's like, oh, what was chasing him? He's like, nothing. Nothing was there. He was being chased by nothing. And Sam notices that the clock at the pool has stopped. And he asks when that happened. And he said, oh, yeah, that must have happened at the same time, because that's the time that the guy died, whose name is Marshall Hall. So that's the same time that Marshall died. And so Sam now
is also a bit sus now.
Yeah, he knows something's up. He realizes that there is something going on. So when Dean comes back to the motel, Sam is like, I'm so sorry. I think
You're right.
I think you're right. I think something is going on, and we need to find out what it is,
Yeah.
and we need to stop it.
And while he's telling Dean that, he also mentions that Marshall passed away at like, I think it was like 20 to 4.
Yeah.
3:40. And Dean's like, that's when I was healed.
Yeah.
So there, you know, that Sam's on the same plate, like same page as Dean, and Dean's page has been cemented essentially. Like, yeah, we need to find out what's actually happening.
Yeah, and so Sam also says that he recognized the cross that was on the altar. It's a Coptic cross, so it's an unusual type of cross.
Yeah.
And that it can be associated with black magic. In the meantime, while all of this is happening, while they're figuring this out, we also have this scene of Roy healing this old man, and we also have another scene of a woman being chased by a reaper.
And she's running.
She's clearly young and healthy and fit, and she gets chased by the reaper and killed. And on the DVD, Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult is playing. And what I find this is so weird to me, because I don't know how I figured this out in 2005. As has been discussed, I was immediately obsessed with Supernatural in 2006 when it came out. Like, I loved this show so much, to the point that I had Don't Fear the Reaper and Highway to Hell on one of the mixed CDs that I played in my car. Because this was in the before, like, I didn't own an MP3 player until I was like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Because I was poor and I did not have money. But it was on one of my mixed CDs, and I was like, and I'd gotten it obviously from watching that episode, but like, how did I didn't know what that song was beforehand. Highway to Hell, of course I knew what that song was.
Yeah, we all do.
But how did I find out in 2006 what song was playing on a TV show that I would have at the time only seen once? Like, how would I have figured that out? All I know is it was on one of my mixed CDs. And so I love that song now. Here's my theory.
Your dad?
No. For reasons we'll talk about later, I would have been watching this in my bedroom.
Okay.
We'll talk about that when we get to Route 666.
Oh, Jill, all right.
One particular scene in particular we will talk about.
Is it the sex scene?
It's a sex scene.
All right, gotcha.
I had a TV in my bedroom.
Life was cemented for you.
Life was good for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, the one theory that I have,
Huh.
and it's an insane theory.
Okay.
Maybe I got it from the Supernatural Wiki. Because the Supernatural Wiki started in like August of 2006.
I mean,
It's been around the whole time.
Yeah.
And so maybe it wouldn't have been Google. It probably would have been
Ask
Yahoo,
Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves or Yahoo Answers or whatever. But maybe I found the Supernatural Wiki, and because they have all of what the songs are and like all of that stuff, and like
That would make sense.
right? I think I found the Supernatural Wiki, which is kind of sweet that then years later,
Full circle moment.
now I get to tell them all the time that I love them on Twitter, which they probably find very annoying. So that night, because they've sort of figured out that they need it's black magic, and Dean realizes that what he saw was a reaper.
Yeah.
And Sam's like, "Wait, what do you like?" The Reaper,
like the Grim?
Reaper. And Dean's like, no, like a Reaper. There's not just one Reaper.
Yeah. There's it's almost like a hierarchy. Like the Grim Reaper is like the CEO, and then he has like little underlings known as Reapers.
And they think that it's Roy that's controlling the Reaper. And so they're going to break into his house to find the spell book that they would be using to control it. So that night, Sam breaks into the house to try and find the book of magic.
Dust.
Yes. In the meantime, Dean is in the tent. He's just keeping an eye on things. And of course, I've missed a whole bit.
That's what I thought. I was like, have we missed the whole bit? Because we find out about Layla's condition.
So
I was like, maybe I've missed it. Maybe I got this wrong. And I'm like, no, wait.
No. So earlier on in the episode, after Dean has finished speaking to Roy, he goes outside and he sees Layla
on the steps of the preacher's
house. And she is trying to see him again, and he's not taking callers anymore. He's not taking visitors. And Dean is there, and Dean sees Layla, and he finds out that Layla has a brain tumor, and that she's terminal. And it's terminal. She only has months to live. And this really sets up something for the rest of the episode, which is that idea of who who is worthy of being saved. Layla has been gentle and kind and has faith and belief in this thing, and Dean does not believe what has happened to him.
And Layla's mum is really she is desperate, so she's lashing out from her pain at Dean.
Yeah, of course. But Dean, I think, only really has eyes, as it were, for Layla and for him being saved over her.
It's gonna it's setting some seeds in there.
Yeah,
because Dean is mad about who, and he even says like who gets determined. Like he's mad about the fact that there's trading of life for a life.
Yeah, that a man died, Marshall died, so that he could live, and that's in Dean's eyes not fair.
Yeah,
there's this trade that's happened. And so now we've cut to that night. Sam's breaking in, and Dean is in the tent, and of course it's Layla that gets picked to be healed.
Yeah,
and Sam has said, you just have to stop him from healing someone. And of course, Dean is very torn about this
because it's Layla,
and he's had this kind of connection with her, and he's seen that she seems to be good. She is a good person who deserves to live, and he tries to stop her for obviously without trying to explain what's going on. But she she wants to live too. She wants to be healed.
Yeah.
And so she goes up on stage to be healed, and as a last ditch resort, Dean calls fire because in the meantime Sam has realized that the person that they are targeting that night is a protester that's been out the front of
calling them charlatans,
calling them on their bullshit. He's been out there, and so they've decided that is who is due to be
the sacrifice.
That's who they're going to kill.
Yeah.
But what's also revealed is that
Sam's
Sue-Ann is picking people she sees as immoral, and that Marshall Hall was an openly gay teacher. And this is the thing that I remember from the episode, because for those who weren't old enough in 2005, and maybe for everyone else, to cast your mind back to the world of LGBTQIA plus representation in 2005, it was patchy at best, problematic at worst.
Yep.
And it was such a throwaway, and I think this is what scraps those of us who consider ourselves allies were clinging to, was the idea that that Sue-Ann had picked Marshall to die because he was gay. He was an openly gay teacher, and she thought that was immoral, and that the boys thought that was wrong, that she was doing that implication was there, that
it wasn't fleshed out as much.
No, but this was all we had to go on at the time. And at the time I remember being like, oh my God, they're talking about a gay person on television. What's happening?
And it's not Will and Grace.
And so, that was the only bit out of this show that I actually remember from the time.
So
because at the time I was like, oh, are they talking about a gay person? That's so exciting. He's already dead in the show, but this is all we had to work with at the time, guys.
Basically, Sue-Ann is she's the decider. And because Sam's broken into the house, he's found the book and he's worked out it's actually not Roy, it's her, and she's judge, jury, and executioner, essentially.
Yeah.
She's made up her mind based on the faith, based on her own faith, that she knows who is bad and who is good.
Yeah, so other people who have died have been abortion rights, activists, and now obviously this person that is protesting. So Sam's trying to protect the protester. Dean, in the meantime, has yelled fire and gotten everyone out, which
the Reaper has gone away.
Eventually, and this is when they've worked out that it's Sue-Ann and not Roy.
Yeah.
Because they see Sue-Ann in the corner still praying to whatever dark force she has enslaved.
Yep.
And she realizes Dean has worked it out, and she gets Dean kicked out and sort of banned from returning. As they're leaving, Layla asks Dean why he would do that. And he tries to explain that it doesn't feel like it, but it was
the right thing to do.
The right thing. And she, of course, kind of just really continuing on to show that she, really...
She's a good human.
Driving home how pure she is compared to how impure, I guess, Dean feels in his heart.
Yeah.
That she says, after he did this, she says, I truly wish you well. And he's like, you too. And as they're leaving, they hear that Layla is going to have a private session with Roy that night, and they're going to try and heal them again.
Yeah.
So Sam and Dean now know that they have to stop him. Dean's kind of for killing people, but Sam's like, no, that's not what we do.
Yeah.
We don't murder, then we're no better than they are. And so instead they decide that there must be an altar in the house that they need to destroy, and also that they noticed that Sue-Ann was holding a Coptic cross, which is the same cross that's on the altar in the church, while she was praying, and maybe both of those need to be destroyed.
Yep, to break the hold over the Reaper.
Exactly. And so they go back that night to destroy the altar. Dean distracts the police that are there kind of guarding the area by
running around. You can't catch me.
By drawing attention to himself and then running off. Sam breaks into the altar, but Sue-Ann finds him.
Yep.
And he destroys the altar, but she locks him in the cellar.
Yep.
So that he can't help. But in the meantime, he has worked out that Dean is now the target, that they're going to kill Dean.
Because she sort of makes reference that, you know, your brother is a sinner, he should have just been grateful, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. And we're in this private session for Layla, and they're calling upon the Reaper to heal her. And because we now know that Roy is innocent, he truly believes that he has the power of God. I do still think that it's kind of interesting that he picked Dean.
Yeah.
Given that he doesn't have any powers really, it's his wife that has powers.
I think if in his head he's probably thinking, well, we've got this non-believer. If we fix him, maybe he will become a, you know, I believe and preach. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I actually wonder if he
sensed something.
Yeah, like because I don't think that Roy necessarily has that kind of evangelicist sort of sense of like, for, you know, 19 easy payments of $9.95 you can be admitted into the hereafter.
Yeah, it's definitely not. He's not. It's not 2 a.m. and you've just found the TV show. Yeah. You haven't switched to like TVSN. You know, TV shopping network. You've got the Lord and, you know, 20 easy payments.
Yeah, so
I think he just purely thinks he's helping. He actually, and he may have sensed it because he's blind. He did say all his other senses are heightened. Maybe we're getting a sense that he knows something about, there's something about Dean.
Yeah, and also in this show, we haven't actually approached whether or not there is a God in this world.
No.
We now know that there are demons in this world, but we haven't approached whether or not there's a God. And I wonder if Roy has powers that are holy in nature.
Yep.
And that's why he picked Dean, because the words he used where he's like, you've got work to do, you have a task to complete, they're very specific to Dean.
Yeah.
In terms of the Winchester boys in general. So I just wonder sort of ultimately what made
Roy... we don't get the answer to it in this episode, or in the future. So, I mean...
No. And what I found really interesting, so Sue-Ann obviously calls up the Reaper to kill Dean, to heal Layla. And I hadn't really connected the dots in the same way that I did this time. But this whole through line of Dean feeling like a life for a life is not an equal equation, and that he was not worthy to be, like, he doesn't deserve to be saved.
Yep.
He doesn't run when the Reaper comes. Everyone else runs. And I'd never really clicked in my head that he didn't run because he knew Layla was going to get healed. And for him, that felt probably fair.
Second time I watched this, so I watched it on my own and then I rewatched it with Joel. That's when it clicked for me. I'm like, he's not running because he wants to put the, in his head, it's the balance.
Yeah.
It's putting
things right.
He's setting in his mind, you know, Marshall has died unfairly to save him when Marshall should still be living. He can't bring Marshall back, but there is Layla, who is this pure, almost angelic presence, this good human, like pure human. While he can't bring Marshall back, if he dies, she lives. In his mind, he's made, you know, that's equaling out. That's the perfect equation.
Yeah.
And it took me a second, and I sat there when I watched it with Joel, and I was like, oh my God. And rewatching it again, it sort of drives home this, unspoken equation he's done in his head.
Yeah, which is that he wasn't worth saving in the first place, and that he's not worth another human life, and that this somehow sets it right.
Yeah.
But Sam has broken out of the basement. He goes up and destroys the cross that Sue-Ann has, and that sets the Reaper on Sue-Ann because Sam has mentioned before that, you know, trying to control a Reaper is like being at the center of a storm. You know, you're trying to control death, and that is something that shouldn't be controlled by a human.
And they don't like it.
And they're not into it. They don't like to be controlled or told who or what they should reap. And so he takes Sue-Ann, but sadly, although he takes Sue-Ann, he doesn't heal
because
Layla.
there's no, I guess, conduit.
The spell is broken.
Yeah, the spell's broken, and unfortunately, Roy has worked out that his powers aren't working.
Yeah.
And something seems wrong, and Layla, unfortunately, doesn't feel different.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's really sad sort of all round for everyone.
Yeah, I kind of wish, I mean, it works in this episode, but I also wish that the Reaper would have acknowledged that Layla was nothing, like Roy and Layla were nothing but pure people who had faith in the, you know, with God and obviously death and understanding like the life cycle and understanding that I wish he could have just given her like Sue-Ann's life to Layla. But alas, it did not happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a more interesting discussion
that
because, you know, a life isn't equal another life.
No.
And that you don't get to pick. And although, yes, it would have been amazing to have Layla healed.
This is not the show. This is not.
No, at the price of Sue-Ann, that's not the reality.
No.
So the next day, Sam and Dean are getting ready to leave. Dean's clearly incredibly troubled by this.
Yeah.
And he's like, did we do the right thing? Because it doesn't feel like we did.
Yeah.
And there's a knock on the door, and it's Layla. And Sam, sweet, precious bean Sam, has called Layla to talk to Dean. And she's like, yeah, Sam told me that you wanted to say goodbye. And Sam just like with the pure heart that he has, knowing what Dean needed, is like, I'm going to go get something to drink, and just kind of leaves and gives them some time and space to talk. And Layla tells him that Sue-Ann died, that
she died of a stroke.
She died of a stroke, and that she had a private session with Roy, and that Roy hadn't healed her. And Dean was clearly feeling incredibly guilty about this. And Layla's like, you know what? I'm kind of okay with this. You know, you can't have faith just when things are good. You have to have faith when things are bad as well. And I have faith, and so I have to have faith in the bad times.
Yeah.
And a really a really true perspective on what faith ultimately means.
Yeah.
And Layla says goodbye to Dean, and Dean says that he's going to pray for her. And
it's very sweet.
And she finishes by saying, well, that's a miracle right there.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode.
It's a very hard-hitting episode. It plays on a lot of emotions. It plays on a lot of emotions as humans, not in a supernatural universe, of what's happening. And, you know, would you take a life to save someone that you love dearly? Like, it plays on a lot of that. And it's why I enjoy this episode. Like, it's not top 5. Scarecrow is in top 5 mainly because it's campy as fuck, and I fucking just love that. But this one is more of this for me was like at I guess another pinnacle point where I'm like, this is not just a laugh show. Yeah. This is taking on some things that make you think and sort of resonate with you. Like after this episode always resonates, and hence why when you asked me to do this podcast, I thought of it. Yeah. Because it just resonates about, you know, something that's happened in my life that was not great and grieving, and you can, you know, relate to the characters on a deeper level than just like, I'm definitely a Sam. No. It's like, oh, you're going through a step. You're going to lose someone that you love. Would you do anything? It's playing on the what if.
Yeah, and I think it sets up the more complex nature of this world that they live in, this universe that they live in.
It's not just demons and, you know, poltergeists and such.
Yeah, and it's not as straightforward. And I think that makes for a more interesting story than just straight right or wrong, good or evil.
Yeah. It's not just surface, and I like that.
So thank you, Rael and Sarah.
Yeah, memorable episodes. I'm putting this in the memorable episodes. I have a lot of lists. There's a lot of lists, guys. But yeah, it's a great episode. It's nice to take a step out of where they've been, to take a step out of worrying about dad, worrying about the demon. Well, we just found out the demon that killed Jess and Mum, and it's nice for them just to focus on this one thing that's happened, but still means a lot in the entirety of their arc of Supernatural.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great episode.
Very good episode. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Follow us on Instagram at We Will Talk About It Pod. You can follow us on Twitter at We Will Talk Pod. Our website where all of our show notes live is wewilltalkaboutit.com. Tell a friend to listen to this podcast if you like it. Tell a colleague. Or leave us a review and a nice rating on iTunes if that is your chosen device. In the meantime,
stay safe and don't enslave reapers.
Bye, guys.
Bye.